Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And oh my goodness, are you in for a treat today as I am bringing you another special guest? Today, I'm getting to talk to Metha Vasquez. Metha, well, she's a certified HR professional. She is a certified professional coach. Her company is called Meet the Peak. She's also the 2024 Hill Country HR Association chapter president. Meet, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great, and thank you for having me. I'm just glad to be here talking with you this morning.
Well, I'm glad to be here talking with you too. You know, I always like to reflect whenever I start the show. And for us, we met at the Texas SHRM meetings, and I have been watching your journey, and I have just loved it. I want to ask you though, for those who don't know, Meet the Peak. Share a brief highlight of your organization and how you serve your customers. Would you do that?
So basically, I help HR professionals and leaders develop their interpersonal skills, their executive skills, their HR skills, and I help them in the job search process. So I'm completely dedicated to their career advancement and progression all day, every day.
I love that. And we're going to get into that. I was doing some research. I saw, yes, definitely job search coach. You're also an executive coach. You do some life coaching. But one thing that caught my attention too was the job search classes. You also offer that. And then I saw you also speak on vulnerability and self-care. So I definitely want to get into that. And I know you, I've met you. I know a little bit about you, but I would love to know the Metha Vasquez story. Like, where did you grow up and how in the world did you get into leadership and coaching and all things HR?
Well, I grew up mostly in Texas, but
Hmm.
I have moved around quite a bit for jobs. And I'm married 30 years. I have three adult children. So that's a big aspect of my life. And I tell people I'm on my third career. So my degree is in hotel and restaurant management, and I was in that industry for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I absolutely loved it, but it's not real great for work-life balance and having children. So the last job I had in the restaurant industry, I opened new Cracker Barrels,
Hmm.
where I traveled around the country and did all the recruiting and training for Cracker Barrels. So
Wow.
that
Okay.
was a good evolution for me to cross over into HR. And I did HR for 25 years. And then I decided when I wanted to go out on my own, what did I want to do most? And that was just develop HR
Hmm.
people. So that's kind of like my personal and professional journey at a 50,000 foot view.
Yeah, I love all that. When I wrote my book, Drive with Purpose, there was three different stages I talked about. There's a stage of learn, then you earn, and then you return. And I feel like after I started doing some research on you, I was like, you know what? She learned it, then she earned it, and now she's returning it. And I love all that. And by the way, my mom is a big Cracker Barrel fan, so that's so cool that you're part of that. I will tell you when you said about the balance, the work-life balance, or being able to balance your family life and career with the hotel and restaurant industry. That really struck a chord with me because my parents owned bowling centers, and I
Ah,
grew up in the bowling business, and so I was in my job. I was managing the bowling center, and I was working nights and weekends. And my wife was a school teacher, so she worked in the daytime. So we never saw each other. And that's what kind of moved me to Texas is that I had to find that balance. So for you, like what is balance? What is for those listeners right now, like they're like, what is balance to you?
well, yeah, I have this kind of concept that I work with people on where I call it the pie chart of time. Like if you had
Hmm.
a pie and you see a traditional pie chart
Yeah.
and you divide it into segments, that balance is about getting to spend the biggest pieces of pie on what you want to do. So for some people, it's work. For some people, it's family. For some people, it's their spiritual life.
Mm.
So that's to me what balance is being able to stop and say, where do I want to spend the majority? of my
Mm,
time. And that changes over time,
mm,
at different periods of your life.
mm. I love that because that really aligns with, I like to talk about like success too. You got to define your own success. You got to define what's important to you. Just because it's important to someone else doesn't mean you have to go that way, right? I love that. Hey, let me ask you this. One of the common threads that I find with high performers such as yourself is that they have people that helped them get to where they needed to go or wanted to go. And a lot of times we'll call them mentors or sponsors. Any mentors help you get to where you are today? And if so, what was it about them that made them a great mentor?
Yes, so I had one specifically. There,
Hmm.
of course, there were people throughout my life, but I was working for a Fortune 500 company and I had a really great job. I was in HR, I was an HR director. It was a 9 to 5 job. And he tapped me to take this very large global HR job,
Hmm.
which I felt there was no way in the world I was qualified for. There was no way I wanted to travel that much because, I had young children. But he, was just had a great sense of humor. And I mean, like
Hmm.
I was learning hand over fist when he put me in that job, but he taught me not to take things too seriously, that we're
Hmm.
all learning every day. And he just really helped. He had faith
Hmm.
in me. And then when I was in the role, he made sure that I was successful in the role. And then also, he was very much a family person.
Hmm.
So even though I had a very large job, he was always understanding that family comes first. So I think he made sure that I was successful, even though
Hmm.
I really didn't want to travel 50% of the time,
Hmm.
that he made it possible for me.
I love that. I love how you said that sprinkled in humor and not to take things too seriously. I remember early in my career how serious I took. I was like trying to be perfect. And I've learned over time that it's not about being perfect. It's really just about being better, just trying to get better every day. I love that. Hey, I do want to talk leadership but before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about this job search. You do some coaching on job searching. I love that. What's the market like right now? Number one, what's the market right now for that you're seeing or hearing as far as a job search? And number two, how are you able to help people in the job search area?
Yeah, so, having I've been in talent acquisition for 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting what you
Yeah.
see during different periods. Right now, what we were seeing is that after COVID and people were working from home, and then employers started to like bring people back to the office, we see a lot of people trying to apply for remote jobs. So they like the remote thing, and a lot of employers are bringing them back. So what we see is a glut of applications for remote jobs, making it
Mm,
extremely difficult to get noticed and get interviews. Also, because there are so many people applying, we're seeing a massive amount of candidates in the process. So before, maybe like at the final round, there might be 2 people. Now
mm,
there's 5 people at
mm,
the final round. So competition is really, really stiff. So the two main things I help people with is how to get callbacks on their resume. Like really, how do you get somebody to respond when there's 100, 200, 300 applicants in the system?
mm,
And then how to stand out in an interview. What I find with HR people is we don't talk about ourselves so well. We like to
mm.
give the credit to others. We like to be in the background. And then when you ask them to tell their like great stories, or
Yeah.
like, well, I only did a part of that project. So really helping them feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That's the two main things I focus
Yeah.
on.
I love all that. I love the callback. I want to touch on that standout though, because that's hard. I mean, in this environment we're in today, I mean, think about the social media. Like, how do you stand out? How do you stand up for a job? How do you stand out? It made me think about something. I was at a meeting last weekend with the National Speakers Association, and the guy was talking about him and his dad used to go watch a wrestler, and the wrestler, his name was Cale Sanderson, and he's an Olympic champion. But they talked about, going there, and they said, if you really want to stand out, if you really want to, they were talking about being great at your craft or whatever you're trying to go for. In this particular case, he said, you got to hang out at the mat. And I thought that was really powerful. Like I used to bowl
Okay.
competitively. So I hung out at the lanes. And if you
Yes.
want to be a great speaker, you need to hang out around great speakers. What about those that are they're in a job search? I don't know, maybe share a couple of tips. How do they, I don't know, how do they stand out? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so one of the things that people are a little gun shy about and really don't understand about the back office of the talent acquisition processes, they need to follow up multiple times. So
Mm.
they think that if I call it throwing the ball over the fence. So
Ooh.
when you were a little kid and you threw the ball over the fence, did you really think your neighbor was over there just waiting to catch the ball and throw the ball back to you? No, you had to go knock on their door and get my ball back. And
Mm.
so that's what I teach you is that just because you put send in the applicant tracking system or in LinkedIn or Indeed, it goes into a
Mm.
black hole. And I
Mm.
teach you how to get the ball back, how
Mm.
to follow up with them so you can get that phone screen. You could be very well qualified, but if 400 unqualified people apply for the job, you will not stand out.
I love that. I'm sitting here thinking about, like, as a child throwing that ball over the fence, and sometimes I had a neighbor that I didn't want to go over there and ask for that ball back. I mean, that sometimes that can be kind of scary doing that, right?
It is, and that's what I have to work with people on. They think I'm bothering somebody, but look, I
Mm.
was a recruiter for 30 years. I get credit for filling jobs. You are not bothering me, okay?
Mm.
I have to fill so many requisitions per month. So you following up with me, if you're a good candidate, shows me you want the job and that you have great tenacity. And
Mm.
so I have every incentive to try to get you through the process versus somebody who just hits quick apply. And I hope something magically happens to my
Mm.
resume.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Hey, well, let's talk leadership here, because I want to kind of pivot over to the other side as a leader looking for candidates that stand out. Before I do that, though, I want to ask you, I like asking my guests, hey, if someone said, hey, Metha, what's leadership to you? How would you respond to that?
I look at leadership through my children. That's
Mm.
really what I do. It's like
Mm.
waking up every day. They have something to role model to look up to. So
Mm.
even though I have been, I've been vice president, CPO, I didn't really come from that perspective. I came from that perspective of my children. Like, what am I role modeling all
Mm.
day, every day? That's kind of how I approach leadership.
I love that. I love that. The power of influence and modeling leadership. That's so good. Let me pivot here just for a second. We talked about how maybe the candidate, what they need to do, that callback stand out. What about on the other side? What are employers typically looking for when it comes to trying to figure out, okay, I've got 50 candidates here. Which one am I going to choose here? Any thoughts around that when you were in those leadership roles?
Two things that I see consistently, whether it's in the job search process or me as a CPO,
Mm-hmm.
is that I want you to bring your real self. Like,
Mm.
I want you to be authentic. So a lot of people in the job search process says, I need to be this person, and then people can tell that you're fake. And I joke about how we started this video, like I didn't put on any makeup or anything. I mean, that's like me most of the time. They want you to be yourself.
Mm.
And the second thing they want is they want you to show up and how you can solve problems. So in the
Mm.
interview process, like determining what the problems the employer has and explaining, like, okay, I've done these things to solve the problems in the past. But also, if you're already employed, like, okay, the problem that the company is facing, what are you doing to help solve the problem? So that I think that that's what employers are looking for.
That is so good. I love that. And it all goes back to You're being hired for the value you bring. So you've got to be able to show that. And what you're saying is you can show that value by showing up with your authentic self, just being you, and showing them that, hey, here's some skill sets I have, or some knowledge, or some experience I have that will bring value and help you solve some problems and help the organization. I love that. You post on one of the things I do love about this podcast is that it forces me to go out and do some research. So I did a little research. I saw on LinkedIn you posted, I help highly motivated mid-career HR leaders achieve exponential success. And I can see how all the things we're talking about, how you help people. But here's what I want to know from you is that how do you know that they've had success? Any thoughts around like how do you define that? Is that, is that them getting a job? Is that them calling you saying, "Hey, I did it"? What's success to you when it comes to that?
It's those two things, exactly what you said. So we do goal setting at the beginning of your job search process. Like, what are the
Okay.
most important things to you? Like working from home or your compensation or your next
Mm,
title. So we measure against that. So when you do get the offer, we go back and we go back and look at your goals. I
mm,
go back there and I say, how did we do? And to watch them is amazing. Like because
mm.
they advocated for themselves. Oh, you asked for these four things. You got all four of the things. They're like, oh my gosh. Okay. And then in the executive coaching and life coaching type of work, it's the degree of change that they realized.
Mm,
So maybe they wanted to improve their interpersonal
mm,
skills or their self-doubt. Those are examples. So we look at what it is today, and then after they finish working with me, did they achieve those things and to what degree? And so what is inspiring for me is when they said, I used to do this and now I
mm.
do this.
I
That
love
brings
that.
me a world of joy.
That is so good. I do want to stop here just for a second and talk about goals because I think that's one of the things that I often will see a miss on is that people will go out and they're trying to achieve something, whether maybe in this case it's a job search, but they don't really have any goals that they're striving for. And you mentioned goals, like how important are goals? And I don't know, maybe share a couple of goals that you see as kind of a common thing that someone looking right now, they're listening, they're in the car, they just pulled over and they're like, oh my gosh, I needed this today. What are a couple of goals that they should be thinking about that they should have on that list?
So the first goal that we always start with is what is the work that you love?
Hmm.
Okay. So people might say to me, like, because I work mostly with HR professionals, they might say, well, I love employee relations, or I
Hmm.
don't love talent acquisition. So I collect that information from them so that we can see what is the work that you love. Because if we can find you things that you really love, or maybe you want to learn more about benefits,
Hmm.
then you will perform better. Okay, you just absolutely, and this is me being a CPO for many years, you just will perform better if
Hmm.
you get up and do the work that you love. So we always start there. And a couple of other things that we really look at is like where you want to work. Do you want to be in the office? Do you want to drive to work? Do you like being around people? And then your compensation. Those three things
Hmm.
are the crux of generally what make people the happiest together. But we work on what's most important to them. So that's where I suggest they spend their goal setting.
This is so good. Oh my goodness. If you are listening right now, I hope you are taking notes. Meetha, I've already got two and a half pages of notes here. I mean, this has been fantastic. I want to kind of stay in this lane here because we're talking about helping people here. In this particular case, maybe someone is going through transition. Maybe they're just trying to elevate their game. I saw another area that you also speak. You do some speaking. and as well as teach people about this. But you also speak about vulnerability and self-care. And as I looked at that, I was like, man, that could be a pretty that could be a deep subject there. Let me just say this first. What's important about vulnerability, and how do you teach people to be more vulnerable? Because you mentioned earlier the importance of coming up, showing up authentically as yourself. And a lot of that has to do with great storytelling, and great storytelling often includes vulnerability. Talk a little bit about the importance of vulnerability.
Well, what I work with people on is to get comfortable with what they feel comfortable with, because not everybody can feel comfortable being vulnerable. It took me like almost 30 years to
Mm.
get to this level of vulnerability. So, I don't make judgments as far as like, okay, you should be any level of vulnerability. What I try to do, this goes back to the role modeling that I talked about. I talk about some of the terrible things that happen in my life so
Mm,
people can say, oh, I'm not on an island all by myself.
mm.
So I don't propose that they need to be more vulnerable. I'm just role modeling it in case it helps them on their journey.
Yeah, I love that. What about self-care? What would you say someone listening right now should know about self-care, or maybe not even should know, just a reminder, the importance of self-care. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah. So when I talked earlier about the pie chart of time.
Okay.
Okay. So when I work with people on this, I go, do you know what percentage of time should be spent on sleep every week? And almost every person gets that wrong. But if you do 8 times 7, that's 56 hours a week out of
Okay.
168 hours. Most people are dumbfounded
Okay.
that that is such a big proponent of your of your total week. And
Okay.
so things like sleep, like budgeting time to eat. These are things like how many of you eat at your desk, you know?
Mm,
So that's what I mean about self-care is these are some basic things that you have to do right. And your exercise, putting all of that in there, and then things like your family, your work, your hobbies, they come all behind that. And people are like, wow.
this is so good. I just drew my pie chart here. I've got I was like, okay, the most important thing I need to write in here is sleep and eat. And no, this is so good. I'll tell you that I think most of us struggle with this in some way, right? We're trying to get things done, and a lot of times we put the important things to the side. We've all seen that jar about you put the big rocks in first, right?
Yes.
And a lot
Yes.
of times we don't do that. We put all that other stuff in, and like, wait a minute, I didn't get any sleep. So I love that. Hey, let me ask this. So you also volunteer for Hill Country, um, HR Management Association, one of the 31 chapters for Texas SHRM. And so thank you for volunteering. I have a question around that. And by the way, you have some incredible people associated with that chapter. I know I had Pamela Carroll on the show. She's a
Yes.
former president. I know Timmy Wyman. Anna Marie is in one of our leaders classes. Artie is a
Yes.
ambassador
Yes.
for Texas SHRM. She's doing absolutely fan. So there's some incredible people. Uh, but what I want to know from you is uh, how has volunteering helped you in your career and on your journey? Because we all know that when you volunteer and then you become president, it takes a lot of your time. And for those listening right now, is like, hey, I want to get involved or I need to get involved. What's been the benefit for you?
What I tell people, because I have been an HR leader where I had teams working for me much of my
Hmm.
career,
Yeah.
a volunteer leader is different than a career because people don't get paid. So
You don't get paid?
you don't get paid. The people that volunteer and work for you don't get paid. So what I learned about leadership is I learned a whole nother deep level of
Mm,
leadership, and that I have to inspire people
mm,
from their heart and not their checkbook. So
Yeah.
that means that when you are a leader of people and they work for you and they get a paycheck, they do things many times for the paycheck. When you volunteer your time, whether it's in
Mm,
the church, the synagogue, wherever you volunteer your time, you are giving back because you want to give back.
mm,
And so they really want to work for people that inspire them to
mm,
pull out what motivates them. So that's what I learned through volunteering, is that I have to work super hard on my leadership
mm.
skills to get people to show up and give away their time.
I love that. I love that. Okay, I want to dive a little bit deeper here because I know there's probably some volunteer leaders, maybe even not with SHRM chapters. Maybe they're with a mobility group or a talent acquisition group or a different association. Uh, how do you inspire? Like, how do you do that?
I ask them what motivates them. So, like when I interview people to be considered for a committee or on the board, I ask them, why did you even reach out? And
Mm,
typically they will tell you like what motivates them. And then you can find things, in the chapter, whether it's through other civic organizations, things that they like to do that inspires them. So let's take Artie, for
okay.
example.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. So Artie, when I had a conversation with her, she was like, I love to plan. Like in my other life, I was an event planner, like if she had another life. So that just tells me, like, okay, there are people that don't like to do that, in
Mm,
our association. So that goes from the strength finder part. It's
mm,
like just give those things to those people that they love to do, and it's not work.
mm.
Does that make sense?
100%. That is fantastic. Yeah. I mean, it all starts with really developing that relationship and find out what matters to them, not just, hey, come on in here and here's what we're going to do. It's like, hey, well, what moves you? And I love that. That is so good. That is, oh my gosh. I've got chills just like thinking about some of the stuff that you're talking about, uh, and how you were able to help so many people. You also, I did one other, I noticed one other thing that, when we talk about volunteering, like you're not just volunteering for a SHRM chapter, you're also, I noticed here, a member of the deaf of hearing community. Are you still part of that? And if so,
Yeah, so I'm part of the deaf and hard of hearing community. I was born deaf. I'm
okay,
deaf in this ear.
okay,
So I have a transmitter in this
okay,
ear, and
okay.
I have 80% hearing loss in this ear.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay,
yes, I'm just a proponent of helping people in the underserved communities. I have a son that's blind,
okay.
and I have a daughter that's disabled. So I really try to help people in workforce development and underserved communities, open up the door to opportunities, because their unemployment rate is typically double or triple of the
Hmm.
regular unemployment rate. And that goes to my recruiting background too, just wanting to help people identify other opportunities.
I love that. And then we can put some more information in the show notes if you have a link or something that someone can go reach out and find more about that. Uh, I I do want to ask you this question as you mentioned this because those sound like you've got some challenges. You have your work challenges, you have challenges in your volunteer community, you have your own personal challenges, you have family. How do you, I don't know, how do you break through a lot of that?
I joke, and it's a lot of therapy off and on for the last 25 years.
It's from that mentor. He said a little humor.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess sense of humor is one of them. But
Yeah.
I have been off and on in therapy, and I don't hide that. I just tell
Yeah.
people there are different parts of my journey to where I've had to go through therapy. It's not
Mm.
100% all the time that I have to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I've also had my fair of coaches. I've had life coaching, I've had executive coaching, I've had business coaching.
Mm.
So I'm a big proponent of this whole concept of finding the expert
Mm.
and having them help you.
Mm.
So I do that. And then I also, my husband of 30 years, who is
Mm.
an amazing soundboard. Like, I could say, my coach told me this, and he'll be like, or he'll say, hey, I thought of this. Why don't you talk to your coach about that? So
Mm,
really, in my journey, I've had a lot of people helping me one-on-one.
hmm.
That's been helpful for me.
That is so good. And that's probably what makes you such a great coach too, because you know the value of what coaches have brought for you. And now here you are helping others as a coach. That is so good. I appreciate you sharing that. That goes back to what we talked about earlier, that speaking about vulnerability and sharing your story and opening up and letting people know what's going on there. Hey, where can people, I don't know, someone was listening today and they want to learn a little bit more about the job search classes. Is that something that they can sign up online, or is there a link I can link to at the show notes when we finish?
Yeah, so let me give you a couple of resources. So
Okay.
let me tell you the blessing and the curse of having an unusual name. If
Okay.
you put Metha Vasquez in Google, nobody else is going to come up. So I'll spell it for you and you can put it in the show notes, but it's
Okay.
Metha
Okay.
Vasquez, Vasquez.
Okay.
If you put that in any browser, there's only going to be one person come up.
Oh,
So it'll
yeah.
take you to my website, it'll take you to my LinkedIn page. So that's where most people find me, is through LinkedIn or through my website.
I will make sure to put the links there. And I went back to my notes we were talking about before. How do you stand out? You just have the name Metha Vasquez. I mean, come on. That is absolutely fantastic. Okay. I want to ask you this before I shift to my into another area, and that is for someone listening today and they're like, you know what, I feel like I'm on track. I'm growing as a I'm growing as a person. I say growing as a leader. I'm just growing, and I'm, maybe I'm in transition, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm just trying to, get a little bit better. What are some things you mentioned? You have also been a chief people officer. You've also been a high performer leader. What are some things that you did and continue to do, or you see others do that, I don't know, maybe a couple things that helps people stay on track to continue growth in their career?
So one of those items is definitely just continually making new relationships. Is
Mm,
just you, what I call it, the 10-minute coffee chat. Like the first time you and I, we've met before, but
yeah,
first time we had a 10-minute coffee chat.
yeah.
So you have to be open to just like listening and learning from new people. And that just comes from you having a desire to want to learn. So most people, if they just have an attitude around wanting to learn, can
Mm,
achieve anything that they want to achieve. And so I like learning through people. Some people like learning through books,
mm,
podcasts, getting a new certification. So
mm,
what I tell people is to do things that feel natural for you. So when I
mm,
have a client that says, well, I don't really feel comfortable networking, I don't really want to do that in my job search, then I find things like, okay, well, what are you going to do? Let's find out things that you like to do, because I want you to be successful. So this goes back to also to the strength finders thing. If you're not great at doing
mm,
something, doesn't mean you don't need to refine it, but why spend a huge amount of time doing something that
mm,
is not natural?
mm. So that's a good point. If you haven't taken an assessment, maybe go out and maybe that's a start too. It's like, hey, let's assess where I'm at today. And where can I go, for that? And then I think I wrote down earlier, I've written this down like 3 times, and I'm a big goal setter. That's why I keep writing it down. Goals, goals, goals. You've got to have some goals, don't you?
Yes, and that can be goals, and I make goals in all these different parts of my life. I make them in my career, I
Mm,
make them in my health,
mm,
I make them in my hobbies,
mm,
and I make them in my family, and I make them in my work.
mm,
And that keeps me very focused. This goes back to the pie chart of time, that these things are really important to me. I make goals in those areas so I can assess, like, am I on track for what makes me happy?
mm. So good. I love that. I love all of this. This has been so much fun. I have one more question before I'm going to shift over to it's time to accelerate. And I always like to ask my guests if they've ever been given, and you've given some great advice today, but have you ever been given any advice? Maybe it was early in your career, maybe as a child, from your family. Maybe have you been given some advice that was so good, you find yourself sharing that with others often?
I guess one of the things that sticks out from my mother is stuff happens, just you gotta, take it and move on with it. And
Mm,
so like just like I told you at the beginning of this, like I told you, like I had on a different, I thought it was a podcast and not a video cast, so I wasn't dressed. I'm like, whatever, it's gonna be fine. I could reschedule it or I can show up.
mm.
And that's probably, I would say, just don't take things too seriously. Take it as a learning experience and move on.
Yeah, this has been so good. I know, like I said, I've got now 4 pages of notes. I know people listening right now probably got a lot of notes. This has been so helpful, and you provide so much value. I want to shift over to it's time to accelerate for the last part of the show, and the first question I always like to ask is, um, g- would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast? I know you mentioned you like learning through people. Any books stand out to you or podcasts?
So, because I used to travel extensively for my
Mm,
jobs, I listened to
mm.
many of my
Hmm.
books.
Okay.
So when I thought about this question, I thought about, okay, it was really foundational books. So the one list I'm going to give you, you're going to laugh, but these are books that have stayed with me for 25 years. So
Okay.
First Things First by
Mm,
Stephen Covey.
mm,
And that goes to this whole pie chart of time that I talk about is
yeah.
put the things first for you that really matter. 25 years later, I listened to that on audio. It still sticks out to me. Good to Great
Mm,
by Jim Collins. And that's what I feel executive coaching is all about.
mm,
Everybody's good. Everybody that shows up with me,
mm,
they're already
mm,
successful. So what are we going to do to take them to great? That
mm,
sticks out to me. And then I heard, I talked about strength finders many times, is
mm,
I tell people to spend time in what they are really good at and just try to master that. And then one other book is Referral of a Lifetime. And that goes to what I've talked about is I have a lot of 10-minute coffee chats. Referral of a Lifetime is really about building relationships and then you never have to do business development. Is that all comes to you from the referrals. And so those are 4 books that I think foundationally have impacted me quite a bit.
This is so good. I read a lot of books, and I've interviewed a lot of people, over 200 guests for my show, and no one has referral of a lifetime yet. So I put a little star by that one because that has an interest. And all of those books are great. I love how you also said first things first, how that 25 years ago, and now here you are 25. It's timeless. It's timeless as you talk about the pie chart of time and the importance of doing that. This has been, oh my gosh, this has been so good. Hey, in my last book, Life and Leadership Lane, I have a chapter called Great Leaders Are Grateful Leaders. What are you grateful for?
My family and my
Mm,
husband. That's it.
mm,
Yeah, just they have been the foundation
mm.
of everything else that I've done.
Yeah, family is everything. Well, you're a very energizing person. I've been this has been an energizing podcast. Let me ask you this. What energizes you? And it can be in the workplace or it can be a hobby. What really what moves you?
So I think from watching people learn, so that
Mm,
could be my children, like they're
mm,
all adults now, like, okay, like they step in the things that they learn. And in my work life, it's really, we talked about this earlier, it's really watching the aha moments.
mm,
Like they say, I want to be better at something. And then, 5, 6 weeks, 3 months later, we're like, oh my God, I can do this, or I
mm,
have grown this skill, or thank you for helping me open up this path to learning. So really that is like what I call it my jump out of bed factor. That's another concept that I use, is that when you wake up every morning, there's two paths that I usually see for people. People that they lay there in their bed and they go, oh my God, I have to get
Mm,
up. Oh my
mm,
God, I have all this stuff to do.
mm.
Or the people that their eyes pop open and they're like, oh, let's go, and so I want people to be in the second one if they can.
Oh my goodness, the jump out of bed factor. That's fantastic. Oh, I love that. This is so good. Okay, here's my final question. Metha, 10 years older, is around the corner knocking at your door, and you are going to go answer that door. What's she going to tell you?
Don't wait.
Mm,
So, like I call it, don't hunt the football. Like if there's things that you want to do now, don't say when I retire, I'm going to travel. When I retire, I'm going to spend more time with my kids. When I get save this amount of money, I'm going to take this vacation. I would say, Lisa, don't wait. Don't wait. Just find a way to do it
mm.
now. If you want to do it, find a way now.
Don't wait. That is such good advice. And a wise 10 years older Metha Vasquez. Metha, it's been so great having you on the show. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, I just want to real quick, someone wants to connect with you, they can type your name into Google, or they can go out on LinkedIn, and you're out there as well, correct?
Yes, yes. Just put in the search bar, Metha Vasquez. My website is Meet the Peak, which is a play on my name. It's METHAPEAK.com. Meet the Peak.
Meet the Peak. Love that. I will put that in the show notes so you can just click that link. And when you reach out to Metha, be sure and let her know, hey, I heard you on Life in Leadership Lane podcast. Maybe share something that she mentioned on the show that resonated with you, and it will be a instant connection. Metha, this has been so much fun. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on the show, sharing all of your wisdom. It's been so much fun getting to know you, and I can't wait to watch your road ahead.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I love your questions and your interaction. So it's just an honor for you having me today.
Absolutely. Okay. I can't wait to share it. I'll talk to you later.